or not.
True. Well, and then you've got the whole other segment here with the stuff that's going on with Patreon that we've seen.
Let's talk about Patreon, because this did not get a lot of coverage, except that everybody who's on Patreon or knows somebody on Patreon was very upset about this. What happened?
Oh, gosh. Well, in a nutshell, Patreon decided that they were going to change their subscription terms. So essentially, they had a problem in that when you sign up to support, say I decide to support, my friend who does comics, and I sign up on the 15th of the month, I'm not actually going to get charged for my pledge to them. Say I want to pay them $10 a month or $10 a creation. I don't get charged for that until the end of the month. So Patreon was getting ire from both creators and and backers, supposedly saying, "Hey, why do I get charged 3 weeks later for this thing that I forgot I pledged to?" And creators are like, "Oh, these people, signed up to get my stuff and then vanished before the thing could get charged." And so their argument is, "Oh, well, instead of charging everybody at the end of the month, we're going to charge you when you sign up." But that means we have to switch our payment plans around. So it means that we're going to have to charge individual processing fees. So we're changing our processing fee structure. So now instead of creators paying the percentage of credit card processing fees when they get the pledges, instead the backers are going to be paying those processing fees. And in addition to a percentage, like I think it's 2.2% or something like that, you're also getting a flat 35-cent fee. So, for instance, if you pledge $1 to somebody, it's now going to be $1.40 from your checking account every month.
So the biggest change is that you as the donor are paying now instead of the creator. The creator is going to get more money, right?
In theory. The problem with this, obviously, is that donors are obviously upset, and creators are upset because Patreon is not letting them make the call, right? If Patreon said, okay, well, we're going to let you choose whether as a creator you take the hit of the percentage fee, or you make your backers take the hit. And that got some people upset that there's no choice. But I think the real issue, and the issue that I think a lot of Patreon creators have kind of rallied around, is that their initial messaging around this was very vague and very frustrating. And even their clarification as to why they decided to make that change, as I explained to you, it sounds in theory like you're trying to fix a good problem, but you get that coupled with a recent blog post, basically a guest blog post that was made from their head of growth marketing, that essentially said, hey, Patreon's really great, but what we really want to do is move our business structure more to the people who make their living off Patreon and focus less on the people who only make, $200-$300 a month off of our service. And when you couple that philosophy with the fact that Patreon has recently taken quite a lot of VC money, including another round of, I think, $35 million in September, the picture starts to get a whole lot more cloudy. And there starts to be the question of, like, what is Patreon actually doing here? Are they actually trying to, in making this move, push people away from $1 pledges to try and get the people who are on their service to be supported, in bigger and bigger dollar amounts so that they can get more profits? Or is this just a issue of terrible messaging on their part?
So Hank Green posted, and his partner Jeff Jacks on their Vlogbrothers podcast posted, for instance, on Twitter, all of these people leaving because of the change in fees. They're dropping their contributions. Can we confirm that? Are people losing donors,
yes,
patrons in droves? So that's one concern, is that there are a lot of people rely on Patreon.
Absolutely. I have a friend, Mikey Newman, who runs a really amazing video show called Movies with Mikey, which, by the way, if you love film criticism, you should watch it. But I think he's lost something like 95 patrons in the last, in the last 7 days, basically 8 days. And this is a guy who, he's pretty great. He wrote the scripts for Borderlands but he has a personal stuff that required him to make this his full-time job. And for him to basically his entire livelihood be risked on a fee change when you already have so much in your life that's up, thrown into upheaval. I don't think that Patreon really thought this through from a perspective of like, the whole point of your platform is that you're giving people who might not otherwise have a way to monetize their art, And that doesn't always mean people who are making, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month off of a project. It's the people who are making just enough to cover their utilities or even a whole lot more. Like that's who really needs Patreon. That's who really benefits from them. And by basically saying the $1 pledges, they're not really worth it to us, it sets a really bad precedent for what they want their company to be. So they need to get on top of this.
There are competitors, but I mean, for instance, Kickstarter just launched Drip, which is exactly what Patreon does. But that doesn't solve the problem, because if you have a bunch of patrons on Patreon and you've been basing your business for a year or two on this, and all of a sudden your revenue's cut in half, it's not like you could say, "Hey, everybody, follow me over to Drip." Maybe you can.
I think you could. I mean, there's a guy in Australia I follow who does a YouTube channel called Primitive Technology, where he recreates how to make a pottery stuff, and he's working his way up to the Bronze Age at the moment. He gets a lot of money from Patreon, and they're fascinating videos and with no sound whatsoever. But he's seen a massive drop off in Patreon funds. Now, if he was to say to his supporters, okay, why don't we go to this new platform? And if a lot of the big Patreon players turn around and say, yeah, we need to shift to this new platform, and this is why, and explain it to people, I think Patreon could be cutting their own throat just in favor of short-term profit.
I kind of blame the patrons, though. I feel like the patrons, I think this was, all right, this will be controversial. I always thought this was a little bit of a problem with Patreon, is that it's easy to contribute, and it's also easy to stop contributing. And it's a thin thread that holds people there. And all it took was this nudge, 35-cent nudge from Patreon, and the people are going, yeah, screw it. And I think that really reflects more a problem with just the relationship between creators and patrons. I blame the patrons. No?
My concern here is that it's much more nuanced, right? Where I don't think it's just, it's an extra 35 cents. Well, now I'm not doing it. It's the trust is gone, right?
Well, that's the point, is that the patrons are more pissed off at Patreon than they're supporting the creator, and their pissed offness is saying, well, screw it, I quit. Even though it damages the person you're supporting.
It's not in a way, yes, but also you have to consider that the people who are giving these kinds of pledges to Patreon users, like say you're signed up at the $1 or $5 level to promote something, like to give money to somebody. You could just be buying their merch, right? Buying their T-shirts or their books or whatever they're selling. But maybe you're a college kid, right? Maybe you don't actually have the financial means to do that. And when Patreon rejiggers their fee structure and plays around like this, what Patreon is essentially saying is, hey, you who only has $1 a month to support, maybe you support, 10, 15 creators at $1 a month. Now, all of a sudden, your budget to support those creators, because everything's essentially, gone up almost double in price. Okay, now instead of supporting 15 people, I can only support like 6 or 7. So I have to make that call. Who am I going to take away? And it's not that you don't value those creators. It's that physically you have to now decide who do I value most, because now that decision has been taken out of your hands.
So it's an economic decision? I feel like it's more of a typical internet tantrum.
No, I think oh, sorry.
No. I assume you're probably going to say the same, where it's a combination.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think also Patreon, they've got this VC funding. They're actually profitable. I think they make something like $8 million a year.
Yeah, not a huge amount.
No, not a huge amount, and certainly not enough to justify the valuation that's been put on the company. And I think this comes back to $100 million. Yeah, well, this is what comes back to Sorrenti was saying. What they're hoping this will do is mean that all the sort of the $1 and the $2 bit payers that don't really make them that much money, they can just go away. We'll focus on the really big players, and we'll get our valuation from then. And you're just like, yeah, that might work to get you to an IPO, but it kills the platform. You know, all it's going to take is somebody with
Well,
to
this
build
is-
enough of a following together, and they can take Patreon down.
I know Jack Conte. We've had him on a few times. We've had Pamplemousse on a few times, the founder of Patreon, who was a creator, was an artist, and made music and couldn't make a living and created Patreon because he saw an opening. I think he has genuinely a good heart here and is trying to do the right thing. But this is what happens when you do a deal with the devil. When you do a deal with venture capital, the pressure changes. You lose control of what you can do. And I guarantee you, when you have a $400 million valuation on an $8 million net, there's pressure from the VCs. Okay.
Oh yeah.
We got to turn that around. Well, this is not a return on our investment. And so I suspect that that's the problem. I don't necessarily blame Patreon. I blame their investors who are probably putting a huge amount of pressure on Patreon.
Well, I think people are panicking in the sphere now. We saw this with Mashable being sold for a quarter of what it was worth. Yeah. Same with Shazam. Same with a lot of these companies that have built very nice little niches but aren't that profitable and are now having to accept the reality that they're not worth as much money as their investors thought they were.
Yeah, but who in the world would value Shazam at $400 million? I mean, really? Come on. Shazam is the program. By the way, there's plenty of competition, including...
Oh, Google give it away for free.
Pixel 2 XL does it automatically.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they raised $400 million. No, I'm sorry.
No, they raised money
140
to a valuation of, But that money is now largely gone.
Actually, their last funding valued the company at $1 billion for telling people what the song was. So apparently, Apple's getting a good deal.
Yeah. Well,
you know what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying when the Mashable deal was announced, I actually went back and found an article from 2012 on why Mashable is easily worth $200 million, and it was just like
sold for 50 in a fire sale. And somebody's saying, well, you got to blame Jack for taking VC. No, you can't. I think it's a very easy thing to do as a founder to say, we need money. Look, somebody's throwing a lot of money at us. Let's take it and not understand the deal you're doing and the risks you're taking. It's been a hard thing for me. Not that anybody's been throwing money at me, but I want control. I don't want to lose control. Well, also, that was the highest value for me, so that's the thing I wasn't.
I mean, a lot of VCs threw money into these things, and these companies responded by buying up large numbers of staff and getting fancy headquarters when there was no real business case behind it. And if you build it, they will come, and that doesn't work.
Nope.